There's nothing, my mistakes have been put on the public stage. Other people's...
Ferguson makes a major social media change after her ex, Prince Andrew, gives up his royal...
You're thinking of it.
Go on.
I believe it is a beautiful word of love. And I think...
You know when something small happens and at first it looks harmless, almost forgettable, but then suddenly it opens a door you realize was never meant to be opened? That's exactly how this whole thing started. A quiet social media change. A title quietly given up. A former royal stepping back into the shadows. And then, almost casually, Sarah Ferguson sits down and says something that makes people stop scrolling, stop breathing for a second, and think, wait, what did she just say? Because she doesn't just speak in riddles. She speaks like someone who knows the weight of what she's about to reveal. And the moment she opens her mouth, it's clear this isn't about the present. This is about the past. A past that never fully stayed buried. She goes on a podcast, speaks calmly, almost gently, but the words themselves land heavy. She talks about love, she talks about timing, and then suddenly she brings up a name no one was expecting to hear connected to that era, to that circle, to that man, and that's when everything shifts. Because once she says there are people ready to talk, that changes everything. That's not speculation, that's not rumor floating around social media, that's someone saying, I'm not alone in this. And when you hear that, the first question that hits you is, how much has really been hidden all these years? How many stories were quietly pushed aside because they didn't fit the narrative people wanted to believe? Sarah starts tracing it all back to 2009, long before royal weddings, long before polished interviews, long before global headlines, back when Meghan was still hustling through acting jobs, long before the world knew her name. And Sarah describes this London party, this introduction through mutual friends, a
semi-expensive yacht girl, and she knows it.
Many of you have seen this picture already.
Phrase that sounds harmless until you remember who Prince Andrew's social circle actually consisted of back then. These weren't random people, these were gatekeepers, fixers, influencers. The kind of connections that open doors quietly and close them just as fast. And here's where it stops sounding casual. Because Sarah doesn't frame it as a one-time meeting. She says they stayed in touch, not emails that faded out, not chance encounters. Actual planned meetings, private meetings, meetings that required coordination, drivers being called, schedules adjusted. And when someone says multiple times, that's when the story changes from coincidence to pattern. She talks about specific years, specific locations, and people who were physically there. That detail matters because vague stories disappear, specific ones don't. You can feel it in her delivery. She's not scrambling to remember, she's recalling. And that difference is everything. She doesn't sound angry. She doesn't sound vengeful. She sounds settled. Like someone who carried this quietly for years and finally decided the silence wasn't protecting anyone anymore. And when she says, I've got receipts, it doesn't sound trendy. It sounds final. Because saying that publicly about people this powerful means you've already decided...
How relatable is that, eh? You're a single mum of two in Basingstoke. You've just come in off the night shift.
You're willing to deal with whatever comes next. And that's what makes the timing impossible to ignore. Why now? That question hangs in the air. Why bring this up after more than a decade? Is it coincidence that this happens while Meghan's public image is already under pressure? Or is this the moment Sarah finally felt she had nothing left to lose? Once she opens that door, there's no pretending it never existed. And the way she speaks, you can tell this isn't the end of what she knows, it's the beginning of what she's willing to say. And then the story gets heavier. Because it's no longer just Sarah talking. Andrew's former driver appeared.
Well, no one's going to say that, are they? Because he's now going to be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
Yes, the King's brother will be evicted.
A man whose job was literally to be invisible. And that's what makes him dangerous to a narrative. He wasn't there for gossip. He was there for logistics, routes, times, locations. He describes getting calls to pick up Meghan. Not once, not twice, at least 3 times he remembers. Always described as a special guest. Quiet arrangements, luxury locations, places designed for privacy, yachts, private villas, and some visits lasted days, not hours, days. And then comes a moment he clearly never forgot. Walking back in to return forgotten items. Seeing Meghan relax. Seeing Andrew not dressed for company. That kind of moment brands itself into your memory. He doesn't embellish it. He doesn't need to. The discomfort does the work. What gives this story weight isn't emotion. It's documentation. Work schedules, logs, dates, times. The kind of proof you don't invent years later. When Meghan's team responds, they go straight for the driver. They deny knowing him. They call it fabricated. But what they don't address are the records. And people notice that. Because attacking the messenger without touching the evidence leaves space for doubt to grow. Sarah responds fast. And she doesn't soften it. She suggests this is a pattern. Denial. Silence. Deflection. And then she hints something far more unsettling that more people are ready to
now. From, Falklands hero, this eligible bachelor, to this disgraced
be. And that's when it stops being one man's story. Because when multiple voices line up, dismissal becomes harder. Then we're pulled into 2016, a time when Sarah and Andrew, despite everything, were considering reconciliation. And an anonymous close friend describes Meghan appearing repeatedly at Andrew's events. Not random, not accidental. Intimate gatherings, small rooms, familiar faces, and the behavior flirtatious, intentional, creating private moments, pulling him aside. According to this friend, Sarah saw it, felt betrayed, and whatever chance existed between her and Andrew ended there. Sarah later confirms she cut Meghan off completely. No public blow-up, just silence. And in royal circles, silence is loud. Now, suddenly, Sarah's motivations feel different. This isn't just history, it's personal. And then comes the announcement that changes everything again. A book, a full biography, early 2026, not a memoir filled with nostalgia, a structured timeline, names, connections, documents, a permanent record. Books don't disappear like interviews do. Leaks suggest images, notes, and records will be included. A calculated chain of actions, not isolated moments. And once something is printed, it stops being gossip and becomes reference material. When the book is announced, Meghan's response is nothing. No denial, no statement, silence. And silence shifts perception. Then the fallout begins. Netflix walks away, brands distance themselves, sales reportedly drop dramatically, public interest fades. And fading interest can be more damaging than criticism. Behind the scenes, sources describe Meghan struggling, replaying everything, feeling isolated, business partners gone, friends quiet, pressure seeping into her marriage, therapy, journals, affirmations, none of it stopping the external collapse. And that's the cruel truth of public narratives. You can't meditate away canceled contracts. What started as one podcast appearance turned into a driver speaking, then a friend, then a book deal, then consequences. And now we're watching something unfold in real time. A carefully built image colliding with unresolved history. Questions about ambition, about authenticity, about whether a reputation once cracked can ever fully be repaired. Sarah watched the beginning, the early moves, the rise, and now she's making sure the cracks are seen too. So the question isn't just who's telling the truth. It's what happens next. Does the book reopen wounds even deeper, or has the damage already been done? Because once ambition becomes the very thing that exposes you, coming back from that isn't guaranteed. And that's where the story refuses to slow down. Because even when the cameras stop rolling and the statements stop flying, the consequences keep unfolding quietly, behind closed doors. People forget that scandals don't actually end when the public stops talking. That's when the real damage sets in. When the phone stops ringing. When invitations quietly disappear. When meetings that were definitely happening suddenly get postponed. And then never rescheduled. Inside royal adjacent circles, there's a shift people are whispering about. Not outrage, not shock, fatigue. That's the dangerous part. Because outrage still means relevance. Fatigue means people have already made up their minds and moved on. Sources say doors that once opened easily for Meghan now stay firmly shut. Not slammed, just closed. Polite smiles, vague excuses, we'll circle back. And everyone knows what that really means. What makes this sting even more is how carefully Meghan's image was built. Every appearance, every interview, every project was designed to tell a very specific story about who she was and how she got there. But now the conversation isn't isn't about reinvention or progress anymore. It's about timelines, overlaps, connections. And once people start connecting dots, it's almost impossible to unsee them. Sarah, meanwhile, isn't backing away. If anything, she seems steadier than ever. People close to her say she's reached that stage in life where fear loses its grip. She's lived through scandals, public humiliation, being written off, and she survived all of it. That gives someone a dangerous kind of freedom, the kind where you're no longer trying to protect an image because you've already lost it once and learned you can still stand afterward. And that's why this feels less like a spontaneous outburst and more like a long-delayed reckoning. Sarah didn't speak when it would have benefited her socially. She didn't speak when it would have protected her standing. She's speaking now when silence no longer serves her. And people sense that authenticity whether they like her or not. The royal family's silence is another thing people keep circling back to. No official statements, no public corrections, no distancing remarks. And in that world, silence is never accidental. It's calculated. Sometimes it's about avoiding oxygen. Sometimes it's about not wanting to pull on a thread you're not sure you can control once it unravels. Because this story doesn't exist in isolation. It overlaps with other controversies, other names, other timelines, and reopening one chapter risks reopening many more. That's why insiders say there's tension behind palace walls, even if it never reaches the press. Everyone understands that once one former insider starts laying out timelines publicly, others start asking themselves why they stayed quiet. As for Meghan, the emotional toll seems to be compounding. Friends describe cycles of anger followed by exhaustion, moments where she wants to fight back publicly, followed by moments where she wants to disappear completely. And that internal conflict is brutal because both instincts feel necessary and neither feels safe. Speak up and risk making things worse. Stay silent and let the narrative harden without you. What's particularly unsettling is how much of this centers on the past she thought was safely behind her. Not recent mistakes, not current choices, but decisions made when she believed no one important was watching. That's the part that rattles people the most. The idea that your earlier self, the version you thought you outgrew, can still reach forward and grab the life you built years later. The book looming in early 2026 acts like a ticking clock. Even without reading a single page, its existence changes behavior now. People hedge, lawyers prepare, advisors suggest caution, and anticipation builds in the public whether anyone admits it or not. Because books don't just tell stories, they frame them. They freeze versions of events in print. And once something is frozen that way, rewriting it becomes nearly impossible. What's ironic is that both women, in different ways, understand power and narrative better than most. Meghan mastered modern media, Sarah survived old school scandal culture. And now those two worlds are colliding. Social media speed versus long-form documentation, viral moments versus permanent records. And it's unclear which one ultimately wins. There's also the question of legacy. Meghan wanted to be remembered as someone who changed institutions, challenged norms, and rose above tradition. But Sarah now seems intent on being remembered as someone who finally told the truth, regardless of who it unsettled. Those goals are fundamentally incompatible, and that's why there's no path back to civility between them. People watching this unfold keep asking the same thing in different ways. Is there redemption after this? Not in a PR sense, not in a carefully staged interview sense, but real redemption. The kind where public trust is slowly rebuilt rather than demanded. History isn't kind to figures whose narratives collapse under scrutiny, but it's also unpredictable. Some disappear, some resurface years later in entirely different forms. For now, though, everything feels suspended. Waiting on pages not yet printed, statements not yet made, reactions not yet triggered, and that waiting is its own punishment. Because uncertainty gnaws louder than criticism ever could. One thing is clear, this isn't just gossip anymore, it's a reminder of how fragile constructed identities can be, and how quickly power shifts when people decide the silence has gone on long enough. Whether Sarah's version becomes the dominant one or not, she's already changed the conversation permanently. And once a conversation changes, there's no going back to pretending it never happened. What do you think? Ever happened? What do you think? Ever happened? What do you think? Ever happened? What do you